says truth is all that matters. Lying and deceiving is a sin. Drifting through a world torn and tattered. Every thought I have don't mean a thing. Don't stop the dance. No more music, don't stop the dance.
Yeah, so tonight we're going to go. We're going to Guelph. I think it's the first time we are visiting Guelph. Going to talk to Rob O'Flanagan. Rob, I think I've been following for about 10 years on Facebook. First saw him or encountered him at an art opening on Queen West in Toronto, and he was doing kind of a poetry performance thing. And yeah, I think the guy who curated that, Chris Healy, was a mutual friend. So I think we kind of started following him.
And he is a painter, poet, journalist, writer of fiction,
yeah,
and musician.
Jack. I would say Rob's a jack of all trades, I guess.
A Renaissance man of all
Renaissance man for sure.
Yes.
And yeah, and I see he's in the waiting room. So
Okay.
Let's welcome Rob aboard. And
There we go.
There we go. Do you know sign language? Semaphore?
No.
Okay.
Those skills have all disappeared.
Okay, I was going to say we might have to start texting each other.
Yeah.
Rob, welcome to Winging It. My name's Mark. You know Charlie.
Yeah.
The room you're in looks like a painting.
Yeah, it looks like one of your paintings.
It's a bunkhouse that I built over the past couple of years in my backyard. And
oh, that's the bunkhouse. I saw the video for that. Okay. That's great.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I painted it like it was a painting.
Yeah, it's right
it
on.
looks like a painting. Yes.
Right.
It's
Well,
nice,
we're just talking kind of maybe a jack of all trades, a Renaissance man. You know.
Well, add architect now to his CV.
Architect, contractor,
poet, painter, journalist, writer of fiction, musician, and now architect.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, I just pin these things on to my resume as I go along.
That works beautifully.
Yeah. So I was just telling Mark that I first encountered you and at an art opening on Queen West at a show that Chris Healy had. Healy, I think that was his name.
Right.
Had curated. And you did some poetry performance stuff that really kind of shook me to my core. And it still, when I think about it, affects me. And I don't know if you remember the piece you did. It was the piece that I remember you were doing. It was like a performance piece that just went, is there anybody out there? Is there anybody there? Is there anybody? And it was so chilling. And kind of apocalyptic that it really, really affected me. And still, when I think about it, it affects me. Was that powerful?
That would be a good poem to resurrect for these times.
Yeah.
Really?
I loved doing that kind of work and performance poetry. I always felt like I was at my best when I was doing performance poetry with this electronic music that I was making.
Yes.
But
yeah. So what's have you? I've heard some of your electronic music too, and have you done? Are you still doing that? I know you're doing some songwriting and kind of more folk song stuff.
Well, a couple of my electronic music making programs kind of expired, and it costs like $600 or $800 now
Oh,
to
crap.
buy Reason, for example.
Oh, yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I've recently been thinking of doing some more soundtrack stuff, background stuff. I mean, I would like to do that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it
I'll
sounds
have
like you're keeping busy with all the other things you've been doing.
Yeah. Plus, I have a full-time job.
You got a full-time job. You've got family. I know you have the adult
Yeah.
children, but
You do, yeah.
yeah.
How have these times affected you artistically or creatively? Have they informed any works, or are they, or is it a deterrent? Is it, have you found hunkering down to be an inspiring thing, or is it something altogether different?
Dampening.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I feel sort of at my best right now as a visual artist, and it has to do, I think, with the absolute need to get into the studio. I mean, I really need to paint, and that need and desire has come about as a result of, you know, the isolation, the lack of distraction, and just the sort of the psychological weight of these times, which is very difficult to explain, but it is kind of an existential pressure of some sort. Yeah. It's like the things that we're used to doing and used to having access to, they're not available the way they used to be, and and that sense of kind of not being able to go forward the way you normally would is kind of deeply troubling in a psychological way, and I've really been fighting with that, and taking it out on my art, and I feel like kind of that I've found my way as a painter just in recent times. I really love what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Pardon?
These works, I can remember, so I've been following you on Facebook, I don't know, maybe 10 years now. And, you know, you've gone through the various phases, but I remember seeing these beginning like little watercolors that you were doing, and they were very playful, and they've gotten bigger and more elaborate, but there was that original kind of sense of discovery, it seemed to me, almost on a daily basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Something was going on there. I was trying to break free from a period of ennui, a period of just feeling stuck as an artist, and so I just started to do a lot of knockoff stuff. I was just trying to loosen up, and I got pretty loose.
Yeah.
And it felt really good, and then it's kind of matured a little bit more into this new work, which is, you know, the kind of bizarre, surreal, suggestive stuff, I guess, that really, it's really what I want to be doing, you know. So. Yeah.
So it's interesting because when you if you take away the drawing imagery, they're like Helen Frankenthaler, kind of abstract, very spiritual, ethereal.
Right.
And then you've got the drawing into it. That's
it's like you lay on top of an abstract background these very these images that flow from expressionism to pop to surrealism. But yeah, you're laying imagery, recognizable imagery on top of, but also very creative and dreamlike imagery on top of these abstract expressionistic kind of backgrounds.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Frankenthaler. I mean, Frankenthaler was kind of it when I first learned about art in university in the 70s. And she was, you know, like an international art star. And yeah, you know, her work had this kind of fluidity about it, and a kind of a landscape quality that was very delicate. And I was just looking at Frankenthaler images online earlier today.
Interesting.
So in a way, I've been throughout my life as a painter, I've been kind of rebelling against that kind of work.
Yeah.
Because
pushed it in the background.
Exactly. I've pushed it into the background and kind of thumbed my nose at it a bit, because I don't think it's enough.
No.
I don't think it's enough to just lay down a ground of paint and rely entirely on the medium. I think you really need to uncork your imagination and get into it and make some mistakes and take some risks beyond just what the material itself can do for you. So it hasn't made me.
I had a similar epiphany, you know, about 10 years ago. I had done about 10 years of abstract work, and a really good friend, drove me home from my last show, and abstract show, and we were in my studio, and he just said, you know, these paintings, they're okay, and I like them, but I don't see you in them. Right. And
by the way, that's one right behind his head.
Yeah, I don't want to.
That's one of the very work he's talking about.
Yeah, it was very.
Yeah, I've seen these things. I'm quite fond of them myself.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and I like them too. But you know, but there is something about, you know, and of course they're not Frankenthaler. I got lots of stuff in there, lots of doodads and drawing. But it was an interesting, because it basically was a doorway I went through, and then it became very, very, you know, I started drawing again and putting a lot of imagery together and stuff. And
yeah, I mean,
so you're still balancing the need for imagery and maybe some symbolism or what have you, with this sort of still the background. The colors you're using are so exquisite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I have a good story to tell about abstract art, but about the color, like when it comes right down to it, I think I'm a color guy. You know, that's sort of, if you were to boil it down to, you know, a thin broth,
right.
I'm like, color is sort of colors is kind of the thing that really just grabs me.
Yeah.
I love color. I love mixing color. Yeah, I love layering up color. And when I'm out, you know, gathering images in the countryside or something like that by camera, it's again color that is the main attractor.
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, about 10 years ago, I was doing this series of paintings, these hard-edged abstract paintings, which I really enjoyed doing. And there was something about them that just didn't feel like me. In fact, but in a very odd way. It was like these were coming from somewhere else, and it was in the past.
Right.
They were very retro. They had a retro sense.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And I started looking, you know, for geometric abstraction, researching geometric abstraction from the 50s, thinking, you know, these paintings that I'm doing, they're out there somewhere. I mean, right.
Somebody else already painted them.
And I found this guy, Ilya Bolotowski.
Okay.
His name was a New York painter, an immigrant from Eastern Europe, I believe. And he did these paintings. Some of them were uncanny in their resemblance to what I was doing. And I just thought, okay, I'm channeling this guy.
Yeah.
And I was really weirded out by that.
Yeah.
Now, was that something too that you needed to liberate yourself from?
Exactly. It's like, okay. Yeah, well, it's like I was, it was kind of retrograde. It already had been done, and I was doing it again as a kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like deja vu all over again, right?
Homage, quotation, illusion. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that
weird.
Kind of work,
I wrote a column about it.
Yeah. That kind of work has a certain, like that when you work in that format, you intentionally create limitations that you're going to work within, like
Of
a
course,
structure,
yeah.
right? Like whether doing the
Right.
hard. Mark has done a lot of hard edge stuff in the past.
I did when I started doing figurative stuff, and I now do primarily figurative, but it's all on paper. But when I was exploring and searching for an abstract voice, I found that I needed the hard edge for structure. I needed something to create some kind of possibility of structure for me, and the hard edge with using masking tape and all provided that for me. But I also found that within the masking tape, I could go crazy and do whatever I wanted. Well, not anything, but I could have a lot. My freedom was within the masking tape. It wasn't the whole canvas. And then but I also liked the look because for me, it felt like a collage kind of quality. It felt like I was like you paint something, then you're putting the masking tape on and painting over part of it, and then putting something else on top of that, and so on and so forth. And the end result is not it didn't feel like the end result is a single painting. It felt like there are multiple panels here, multiple types of multiple paintings within a painting, which was part of the goal, but also a true reflection of my probably ADHD. I just can't sit still artistically, and I have to go from something, from thing to thing to thing. So, and it sounds like, you also, I don't know, bounce around may not be the right expression, but you do go from different, not just genres, but different types of art, as we were saying before, poetry, painting, architecture. Do you find are you able to focus on a single type of work at any given time, or do you have multiple projects in different areas at the same time going on? Like, will you be working on poetry while at the same time painting, or are you focusing strictly on painting
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I do it all kind of simultaneously, not simultaneously, but at the same time. No, I try to write.
You're not the cat in the hat juggling.
Yeah, juggling plates. Yeah.
I try to write a bit of poetry every day, and I do write fiction. I'm working on a big fat novel that it's actually kind of done, but it needs to be a chainsaw really to
right.
But the ADD thing, I totally relate to that. I mean, if we really want to go deep into this kind of thing, I don't know if you do or don't, but
of course we do.
I've never been satisfied with anything I've ever done ever since I was a child. I had, reading problems as a kid. I was almost illiterate when I left high school. Really struggled with learning disabilities and things as a kid, and I've spent really my whole life living with that in one way or another, and starting things and stopping. I have like 50 notebooks, and almost all of them are empty. Because I know that when I start one, if I don't finish it, I'm never going to get back to it. And so I kind of just leave them pristine. I mean, there's some things going on that are actually very challenging for me, and have always been very challenging.
Yeah.
When I became a journalist sort of out of the blue in my early 30s, I found a way to kind of direct all of this kind of weird energy into a profession that really, really suit me, because it was all over the map every day, subjects changing constantly,
right.
Meeting all sorts of people. I'm more or less social anxiety type, but being a journalist gave me an excuse to be around people. Mm-hmm. And I really thrived on it. So
that's amazing. Yeah. So
now,
yeah.
Now I found a way to paint that is sort of my way. And I think that's what I was looking for all along, is a way to paint that kind of just came from who I am, my imagination, and my weird kind of dark sense of humor, and my lack of interest in things that are, really popular, because because that's not for me, because I'm kind of like this socially anxious guy, and it's complicated, but
yeah,
I get that.
But the imagery, the characters, and the figures in your works are, I don't want to, they come from someplace, right? They come from someplace personal, part of your personal history, part of your personal interests.
yeah. And then on the other hand, as a journalist, there's I mean, we're Facebook friends, so I know on a daily basis you're asking questions and you're exploring kind of deeper questions about life and spirit and what's it all mean. So
Right.
it's not, it's not just sort of like some superficial playing with color or storytelling. I have a sense of you as a seeker, as a searcher.
Sounds like a quest.
Quest. That's a good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and then that's another thing that we were talking about over the past year under the conditions of the pandemic, where I've really found that that I have more of a sense of urgency related to my spiritual life and my search, and also feel sort of obligated to see my painting and to work as a painter as though it's an act of worship or meditation or prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really kind of getting into that. I really do find that I am really getting into it sort of with my entire being. And I think that's why it feels right,
I have to ask this question, since you said you're getting into the painting with your whole being. This is a question about physicality. One of the videos I was watching of you working on one of your imaginary landscape paintings, you had the canvas on the floor and you were working on it there. Is that how you paint, on the floor like that, or was it just that particular work? Because I have to say, I was in pain watching that. My knees were twitching.
I was gifted with an extraordinary pair of legs.
You must be. You must be.
I have always painted on the floor.
Wow.
Kneeling on the floor since university.
Yeah.
I was like, we got to get him something. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I have it right in front of me there in the studio. There's a stand-up table.
Yeah.
And I couldn't use that, but actually my
get
back,
an easel, man.
well, I have an easel too.
Yeah.
Okay, good. But you do paint on the floor.
Even when I paint outdoors, I am kneeling. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a fairly common thing. Like, I grew up in Saskatchewan, which had an extraordinary visual art.
Very abstract. Very abstract.
Very abstract and very landscape based.
Right.
And beautiful, beautiful stuff. It's like the landscape there really brought out some really good stuff in people. but painting on your knees was kind of a thing.
Okay.
And my oldest brother Tom is a long-standing Canadian painter. I might have picked it up from him or somebody else.
But you definitely,
as long as I can do it, I'm gonna do it.
Right. Well, you know, that's Jackson Pollock, you know, hung over the paintings. Like
Oh,
that.
absolutely,
And,
absolutely. I mean, you're not the first one to paint on the floor by any means, but Jackson Pollock wasn't painting these detailed paintings.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. Kudos to you. My body couldn't take it.
I wonder how much your spiritual, I know you're Baha'i, and how much that kind of filters into what you do, like you are. I mean, it seems, you know, yeah. I don't want to ask too many leading questions other than maybe talk about that.
No, that's fine. I welcome being able to talk about these kinds of things. But I have found it over the years difficult to describe how my faith as a Baha'i has influenced my art. I mean, I can say that the faith has been integral to my whole adult life since I was 20 years old, and it's basically changed my whole kind of character and composition. But you know, there will be some people that know me quite well who probably say that's not the case. But it sure feels like it has transformed me, but how it has transformed me is difficult to describe.
Yeah,
because it is a spiritual reality that one is engaged in when you pray and when you meditate, and you don't really, it's not necessarily consciousness that's being affected, but it's kind of your heart and the way you see and your senses, and these things get transformed over time until it affects every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
So I would say that being a Baha'i, you know, believing very strongly in the need to pursue excellence in all things, for example, is a driving force in my life. I mean, I don't want to be a terrible painter. I want to be a good painter. Yeah. And how do you do that? Well, the only way to do it is just to work. Yeah. And so, you know,
how do you, I'm sorry, I was just going to ask how you reconcile that drive for improvement and I mean, it sounds like you're not just driven to improve, but you're driven to be kind of satisfied. And you were saying earlier that you find that you haven't been satisfied with things that you've done. Is there a way to sort of balance those two?
Well, there's no. I haven't really found a way.
Okay.
There are times when I simply don't believe in myself and what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems no matter how hard I try, I cannot circumvent those feelings. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I pray and I run and I do a host of other things to try to circumvent them. I hope that's the right word. Sure. But I do have these, I have mental health difficulties that are challenging. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I just leave it alone. It's like those ideas, they come and I just sort of try to leave them alone and just keep plugging away.
Well,
And it might be that what's happening on the canvas doesn't feel like it should. It doesn't feel uplifting or invigorating, but that doesn't mean that it's not. It just means that I'm not feeling it.
Sure.
So I've learned how to keep going more. Yeah.
And you seem to do, like, you find solace in nature. You go on adventures.
Yes.
Yeah, you seem to, and your journalistic impulses. You report on these things through social media, and I'm often in awe. Right, you go out on your own, for example, canoeing or on a road trip or whatever. So you're exploring, and almost like you're looking for meaning in those experiences.
Well, one of the biggest contradictions for me is that I actually really love life, but I don't feel that love all the time.
Interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
totally.
I mean,
Totally.
I absolutely love being on a long road trip. But then I go too far and I tire myself out. It's like I beat myself up in the process of something that I love. And yeah, I don't know what that is, but it's my wife is fond of saying that I'm a tortured soul, and she's kind of not joking.
well, and that is part of the profile of an artist, a creative person who's looking for meaning and looking to heal themselves through their art and through it seems like all the various things you do, whether it's taking a canoe trip on Georgian Bay or a bike ride, long bike trip, or working on paintings, or I mean, I would say even the way you use social media is looking for meaning.
Right.
It's not, I follow, 1,500 people on Facebook, and you're probably the person I engage with the most because there's almost on a daily basis, like an interesting question or something you're contemplating. And it's so, a lot of people complain that social media is, whatever, waste of time. It's mind control, whatever you want to call it. But the kind of way you seem to use it or explore it, to me, it's a wonderful thing.
Well, for me, it's a way of not only expressing ideas and feelings and thoughts and images, but it's also a way of gaining acceptance.
Yeah.
It's a way of being accepted by people. Even though I sometimes get kind of cranky and judgmental and all sorts of other things, but it has been kind of a blessing for me because I felt a stronger sense of community as a result of being engaged in social media. There's something about me that kind of doesn't feel that I belong. And tell you, speaking of the Baha'i faith, my family, my wife and I, we went to the Baha'i Holy Land in Haifa, Israel, 6 years ago, I think it was. And I have never felt more accepted and welcome in a place than I did there. It was like, it was literally like going home. I'd never been there before. I had no idea really what to expect. And I felt like I thought or anticipated what I always anticipate, that I will be an outsider there.
Right.
And for the first time really in my life, I felt like a complete sense of acceptance and welcome. And it was so reassuring to feel that.
What was the
kind of a
difference? Was it the
homecoming,
people, or was it the context? Was it just you met the right people there? Was it the way they behaved toward you? Was it or was just everything? Was it the vibe?
It was the, well, yeah, let's call it a vibe. It
Okay.
was a spiritual reality. There was a spiritual reality there that was very elevated. Like, for example, at the World Center, there's no commerce.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nobody selling you trinkets or souvenirs or
Right,
meals
right,
even.
Right.
You're just there to experience the spirit, the holiness or sacredness of the place. And there's a number of different stops in the pilgrimage, and you that's the case at all of them, and you feel this incredible warmth and welcome there. Even if you're a misfit, it was brilliant, brilliant.
Maybe even more so because you feel like a mystic. There's that famous saying, all sickness is homesickness, which is this idea that, I mean, it's more about returning to spiritual home, but it seems like that's a place on earth for your faith that is the spiritual home.
That's right. It's like there's a direct connection there with the high powers, and I feel similar vibes in other places. In other places in Israel as well. I found Israel itself to be just extraordinarily holy place, despite everything. It just felt like it had a holiness there down every street and every walkway, and it was quite breathtaking.
Yeah, I've heard something similar from Christian friends who have gone and done, the Holy Land pilgrimage, and
I was the same way. I was there when I was 13, and it was a bar mitzvah, and came out basically saying, "I'm going to be a rabbi." Didn't happen.
There's still time, Mark. There's still time.
It did have, even as a 13-year-old, it had that kind of power.
Amazing.
Over that experiential power as a 13-year-old. So as a grown adult man who's going with all of that life experience, it must be amazing.
Just a quick story about those new paintings related to kind of Cold War imagery. I grew up on the prairies. Grew up in Saskatchewan, in a fairly remote part of Saskatchewan, like right on the borderline of the boreal forest, so where the prairie meets the forest, and your closest neighbor is like 2 miles away, kind of thing, except ours were like 500 yards.
Okay.
But anyway, when the Cold War was happening and when it was at its height, when I was a child, we were under the impression that we were kind of safe where we were. Because who's going to care about us,
Right.
I mean, they're not going to roll tanks in here or drop bombs on us. But then I think it was as a result of the DEW line, the distant early warning line, and all this new radar that they would be able to intercept Soviet bombs like right over our heads.
Oh, lovely.
Like we were going to get the bulk of the nuclear rain.
You were going to get all that, yeah.
And that changed our life. And so I somewhere in my mind, I got these kind of, something went click, click. And I thought I'm going to put farm life and Cold War together and see what happens. Because when you think about the Cold War, that period was all really just a war of ideology in a lot of ways.
Sure. Yeah.
And the ridiculousness of that, the absurdity, and the kind of the grave stupidity of it is really something to look back on and just and
the existential fear that I'm of the same era,
right.
Growing up with that, right?
Yes.
Growing up with this. Almost certainly you're going to die in a nuclear war.
Right. And
we are all tormented souls thanks to that. And it's back. And it's back. It is back. We're living it again.
Yeah.
Mama says love is all that matters. Beauty should be deeper than the skin. Living for the moment, lips and lashes. Will I ever find my way again? Don't stop the dance. More music, don't stop the dance. Like a lot of the farms around here are these ancient, in relative terms, Mennonite farms. And
Right.
they are this kind of cluster of these geometrical colors and things. They're just amazing. It's my favorite thing about this part of the country. But every now and again, you'll see one that's kind of cluttered. You know, it'll have like a lot of stuff in it. And that's what kind of struck me with these paintings about farms and Cold War relics of the Cold War, is that, okay, you got a farm, well, you're going to store some stuff there. You know, why not store, you know, nuclear submarines and old, you know, assorted monuments and things like that from the Cold War. I mean, it's just like an absurd idea, but that's kind of how absurd the Cold War was, and living under that.
Well, I thought like in the States there were all kinds of like grain silos with missiles in them. Weren't they? I don't know. Where did I see that?
Yes,
I was sure I saw that somewhere.
I can tell you this. So I grew up in 2 hours north of New York City. I'm from New York State, and I remember, I have clear memories in school of having to go. The alarm would go, and we'd all go and do a thing in the gym where we're all leaning against the walls in case the bombs start falling. And at that age, I'm 6 years old, thinking, where are these planes coming from, and why are they flying here in the Catskill Mountains? Why are they bombing us? And you know, I'm not thinking that, well, I'm only 2 hours from New York City. It wouldn't matter. They wouldn't be flying over us. That it would be missiles, and they would be landing in New York, presumably. Yeah. But this was the tail end of the Vietnam War too, so maybe that was what was going on. But I've you know, it's interesting because you were talking, you had brought up that Cold War. I feel it's very topical right now. I think it's very much, there's some kind of thread between what happened up into the late 80s and what's been happening in our part of the world and elsewhere since, you know, 2001. But I think now, when I think back on the Cold War and growing up during the Cold War, I think there are two things that come to mind that I think had an informative influence on particularly the young male psyche. One was a prevalent, and I'm drawing from popular culture. One was a prevalence of Cold War type movies. So everything from Red Dawn to Top Gun to the movies about nuclear wars, and The Day After, that one just ruined me. The other thing was, and maybe not quite related exactly, but I think had a formative influence on my generation, was the teen sex movies, or as I like to call them, the teen rape movies, because there was an awful lot of sexual assault going on, and I can't help but wonder if there is a thread going from that. I mean, we were I was my age, we were teenagers watching these films, moving forward to now where we have the Me Too movement and or movements, and I haven't yet figured out how to bring them all together, but I have been thinking about them quite a bit, especially in the last year or so. And that era, the Reagan, Thatcher, Mulroney era, it's back. It might end in a couple of weeks, but it's back big time right now. Well, there's a showstopper.
There really, He's thinking.
It's definitely spooky, and
Yeah.
but it's also so incredibly weird.
Yeah,
It's
surreal. It's
it's
surreal.
just it's totally surreal and unreal. And
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't quite conscious enough when I was a kid about geopolitics and things like that. Maybe
Yeah.
more so when I went to university. But I don't think that time was as weird as the time we're living in right now.
Well, we're living in some
Um,
kind of Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole world where I mean, I guess it's called a post-truth world right now.
Every alternative version of fact and reality and
exactly
truth
right
is available to everybody who has a Wi-Fi connection or an internet.
No, it really is you really have to work hard to find your own ground and common sense, right? To maintain sanity and figure out what's real, what's not real, what makes sense. Just like when you look around your world, what makes sense? Despite what's going on in media and the larger kind of political world, and beyond, right? There's all the shit we don't know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
That goes on behind closed doors in laboratories and what have you. How do you build community and live in community and foster hope?
Yeah, I mean, this is the world we live in, and we kind of have to live in it. And it has all of this effect on us. I mean, it's been affecting us our whole lives. This tumultuous, disunified, corrupt, falling apart kind of world, and naturally, it has an impact on our hearts and minds and all the rest.
I'm fascinated by your story of you're young and you're in Saskatchewan, and everybody there for the longest time felt we're safe here. We're in the midst of it all. There's nothing to worry about, until you find out that oh no, we are on the missile trajectory and we're not safe anymore. And that the horror that must instill. I mean, again, growing up where I did, it's 2 hours north of, I'm in the comfortable Catskill Mountains, Cream Cheese Hills. Nobody's going to come here, but until you realize I'm only 2 hours from New York City, which would be an epicenter for destruction. And then when that suddenly hits you, there's no real shaking that, is there?
No.
I grew up in Ottawa, so it was pretty obvious
to begin with.
We were a target for sure. Well, we're a target. I don't know.
And I lived in Sudbury for a lot of years in my 30s, and Sudbury was kind of I think Sudbury was presumed to be a target of Soviet missiles too, because it was the world's largest mining center, and supplied nickel for armaments. It had a nuclear component to it. But I mean, I wonder to what extent all of that has affected us, knowing that the future is like I've never really felt, despite my adherence to the Baha'i principles of the Baha'i faith, which really talk about a new world and a much, much better world, a unified world and a peaceful world down the line, I still have never really felt secure about the future for my whole life. And I bet that's a result of the trauma of impending kind of doom. It's not just the Cold War. It was also very prevalent in the church. The idea that of the apocalypse is coming.
You're talking about the Christian church.
Yeah, and I grew up in Catholic church.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, and again, but again, what struck me about your story, which resonates with me, is that sudden transition from feeling safe to suddenly realizing you're not safe. And, you know, certainly the Western Hemisphere has experienced that since March. This flu, this bug, this virus, that was for them. That was all supposed to take place somewhere else. And suddenly it's here and it's everywhere. And we went as a nation, well, as a you know, global community, and even we went from this feeling of being safe to suddenly not safe. And it is traumatic.
Definitely it is, yeah. It's not normal for us as Canadians to feel that kind of level of uncertainty and insecurity, because we've basically been protected from war and the ravages of war. I mean, at least our country has, not necessarily our soldiers and whatnot, but
sure.
So it's quite a different
on our soil,
on our soil is what I mean. Yeah.
On our soil.
Just a couple of weeks ago, we were visiting my son, who is studying in North Bay, and he's up there now. And so we were visiting just at the time when the numbers were starting to spike. The virus numbers were starting to spike in the Toronto area, in Toronto. And there were no cases at that moment in North Bay, maybe one or two, but nothing had been announced. It was a very strange feeling. It was a very strange feeling to be somewhere where there were no COVID cases at the time, or at least none that had been announced. And most people were masked. Social distancing was still in effect, thankfully. And we were very careful because we had no idea if we were bringing anything in. We didn't think so. But it was a very strange feeling. And I can't say that I felt safe for the first time in 6-8 months, but it was just a very odd feeling to be somewhere where this isn't what we're experiencing back home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of a pivotal or crucial part of our whatever life. I'm wondering if, just to shift the conversation back to art, do you feel there's a role in building hope or fostering hope from creative activity, whether you're writing, playing a song, doing a painting? You know, because, you know, a lot of people are talking about, well, like, it's fucking pointless to make art when the world's falling apart. But my own personal feelings are the opposite. I feel that it's more crucial than ever. And just wondering what your feelings are on that.
Well, I was talking a bit earlier about this idea of approaching art as if it's an act of worship or of meditation and prayer. And I thought to do that because I deeply, deeply believe that in an afterlife, in a life beyond this life, and that this life is a preparation for that life. And so why should I stop preparing for that life? I mean, even if I was going to die tomorrow and knew I was going to die tomorrow, I would hurry to prepare for that life, right? And I feel that that's where my art wants to go. It wants to not promote, but nurture my spiritual life until the day I die, you know? And to me, I find that to be a hopeful message. There's a message of hope there.
It's a very inspiring message.
one of the things I like to ask artists is who inspires them, of what artists or yeah, or who they find maybe an influence or an inspiration, or and you know, it obviously it shifts and changes over the years, but I guess another way I ask it is, when you feel stuck, who do you look at for inspiration? What art do you look at?
Well, you know, because of my attention problems and my flightiness, I look at everything. I really do. I look at everything. You know, there are some go-tos. Like I really like Philip Guston.
Absolutely.
You know, I saw an exhibition of his in Montreal many years ago when I was quite a bit younger, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, these big inflated heads and everything in pink, and oh my God, cigarettes, and
Yeah, yeah.
it was just,
You broke a lot of rules, right?
just broke tons of rules. And in the next gallery, there was an Anselm Kiefer exhibition.
Oh my God.
And that was like, oh, I just couldn't believe that somebody could do such grandiose work, such work that would actually stick together.
Yeah, yeah.
What a combination. That combination itself, I don't know how I keep my head together after that.
It was awesome.
Like, talk about overstim.
Yeah. Well, and like two of the greats, right? Great.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
I mean, totally different styles and approaches, but extraordinary stimuli.
Just two
very different kinds of stimuli. Yeah.
Just right off the chart.
Off the charts.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean, you can't go and see either of those guys and not leave like just wanting to run to your studio, right?
That's it. And that's really what, I mean, all the time that I've been painting, that was my measure of something's effect on me, was it made me want to paint. And when it didn't make me want to paint, I would say, no.
Yeah.
Another person that I really love, and I don't know if you know who this guy is, but William Kurelic.
Oh, of course. I love
William Kurelic, the prairie painter.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was looking at one of your pieces today, and I was like, let's get a little bit. I didn't think of Kurelic, but I was thinking a little bit folk arty kind of.
Yeah, like he hasn't really influenced what I do, but when I see his work, I am truly inspired.
Yeah, he had a vision.
He had a vision, and he had great purpose, and he was really a masterful painter, but he had that kind of folky streak as well,
and a bit of madness. He had madness.
He was quite troubled and spent some time in an asylum, I believe.
Yeah.
But I love Kurelic's work. When I was studying at the University of Saskatchewan, I did a lot of courses at St. Thomas More College, and in their chapel there, they had this grand Kurelik on the altar, behind the altar.
Right.
There's a technical term for that place in a church, but I don't know what it is. It was just this revival scene. Jesus coming out of the ground, and people.
I'm a huge Kurelik fan. I mean, I love art like that. I don't know if you know. Oh my God, the British guy. Anyway.
Paul Nash.
No, I know you posted.
I like.
I'm thinking of figurative guy. Why is he slipping my mind? Really quirky, esoteric, eccentric. Oh my God. Anyway, one of my favorites. Stanley something.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Anyway.
Well,
doesn't matter.
We've used up a lot of words here tonight.
Yeah.
You just don't have any.
Yeah, that's it.
There was a guy too. He was a Baha'i in Saskatoon when I became a Baha'i and sort of started to investigate the faith in the late 70s. That was Otto Rogers.
I love his work.
Yeah, Don Rogers. We called him Don.
Don, okay. Yeah.
But his name was Otto Rogers in the art world, and he was a great Canadian painter.
Yeah. Well, and his work was like abstract, but it felt almost devotional.
It felt devotional, and it felt like landscape. It was like I probably derived a lot from his work, because it was all about prairie tones.
Okay.
There was the greens of the prairie and the ochres of the prairie.
Yeah.
And it was like fields, and the way the fields in Saskatchewan butt up against each other. You'll have a one tone of a kind of a yellow, and then you'll have the sort of flax, or you'll have barley, which is a different tone of ochre, and these beautiful tones. And that was very much part of Roger's palette.
Like a patchwork kind of, but of like you say, these very earthy tones.
Very earthy tones.
Yeah.
So but usually when I'm stumped or not wanting to work much, I'll find new stuff to look at.
Right on.
It's
So
like
you're always looking for something new.
Always looking for something new to look at and to love, and always looking for something new to listen to. I'm always in search of new music, to run with and listen to in the studio. And I don't really have a musical identity or anything. I'm not locked in terms of the kind of image that I want to portray. I just want to get into stuff.
Yeah, no, I love that. Go from folky to electronic to
bring it on.
Yeah.
Like I said, I love life. I just sometimes don't recognize that I do.
Well, I think on that note, we have a lot here to work with.
Yeah, good.
Great chatting with you. And
fantastic.
It's been just super. Really.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And
okay, guys.
Great.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Thanks, Mark. A great pleasure to meet you. And
pleasure is mine too.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. Take care.
Mama says only stormy weather. Don't know why, no sun in the sky. Footsteps in the dark come together. Got to keep on moving or we'll die. Don't stop the dance. No more music, don't stop the dance. Don't stop the dance. No more music, don't stop the dance.